Hey there, welcome to episode 56 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I'm your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo, recording this on the afternoon of March 15th, 2024. It's a rainy and cloudy Friday here in the greater Vegas area. We do need the rain, so that'll be fine. Today we're going to talk about a few things, including our official, finally, at long last, name change in an episode titled Names and Collectives and Collaborations. So let us begin. Our name change status has moved from done, that was recent, to administrative tedium. That's ongoing. In the meantime, it could be worse, which could make things better eventually, depending on your perspective. And that's where we get into the collectives and collaborations. Wherever you found this audio program, I hope you were able to see our links. I have a few links today. Normally, I only link to our website and our GitHub organization. Today, there are a few relevant articles and things to check out. First of all, like I said, our website, innovateforvegas.org. That is our business website. I've done an episode recently on the 4.Vegas project, which will hopefully feature more volunteer-driven efforts, showcasing the volunteers themselves, projects, maybe sandboxes for deployed things. So this is a longer-term, over-the-horizon direction. So innovateforvegas.org, business website. Finally, we need to update what it looks like and what it does. So finally, now that we have a milestone reached, which I'll get into in a second, that will come next. Our GitHub organization has been updated to reflect our current name change status, which is done for the IRS. So our nonprofit corporation and our IRS determination, EIN, and so on are all renamed Stripe, through which we receive donations and other financial transactions. And one of our fintech service providers have also, Stripe is almost done, and the accounts payable platform is done. Accounts receivable, taking a little longer. Maybe I'll talk about that next week. And then there are a few of the finer points. So Code for America Brigades, the program has been sunset. That means it's been ended. There's an article on statescoop.com about the local brigades coming to an end. I've linked to that as well on the codeforamerica.org website. Code for America, by the way, is a California nonprofit and a 501c3. Code for America has a blog post by their CEO, Amanda Renteria, Reflections on the Brigade Network's next chapter. We'll get into that in a second. The Alliance of Civic Technologists has merged from the Brigade sunset, commenced, I think, in May of 2023. They have their last activity that they have published on their public website is from July of 2023. It's an ongoing effort to get the band back together, so to speak. I'm overly simplifying that. Recent events may force a re-examination of how they're trying to accomplish this. Speaking of that, the Open Collective has an article on their website. Open Collective is a for-profit entity. They are part of or affiliated with the Open Collective Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit entity. Open Collective Foundation is dissolving. It means they're shutting down. And this is substantially impactful for any of the former brigades who were depending on fiscal sponsorship from the Open Collective Foundation to continue operating with the ability to collect tax-deductible donations and other support and have access to cost-reduced or even gratis services. And I can list some of those that we take advantage of in a moment. So that dissolution is very recent. It's, I believe today, the 15th of March, is the final day. I think the announcement was a week ago. Today's the final day that they were able to accept donations through the Open Collective Foundation. Not all former brigades were using Open Collective Foundation, but it was more than one, more than zero. So this is another barricade, another speed bump another gate to pass through, etc. There's an article on the Council of Nonprofits about what fiscal sponsorship is, how it works. In case you're wondering, fiscal sponsorship is an actual IRS thing. It's completely legal, above board. It's totally normal. For example, when we first formed our nonprofit Code for Vegas Foundation as an independent Nevada nonprofit, we had a fiscal sponsor. To be clear, now you can tax deduction, tax exempt status can be conferred on an entity retroactively, which it was for us. But in the interim, anyone who might feel the need to donate to an existing 501c3 can do so with our pending status. So it's a matter of paperwork. It's a matter of public perception and clarity, transparency, and so on. If, however, you are not forming a nonprofit entity, or there may be other reasons, you can check out that article, you may not be a tax-exempt organization ever, in which case having a fiscal sponsor makes it easy or easier to accept tax-exempt, tax-deductible donations. Please consult a tax preparation professional. I am not an attorney nor a tax preparer myself. So if you do have a project, this is especially relevant. The example I could give is if you do a food drive around a holiday, or if you have a particular activity that would benefit from having funding through a tax-deductible donation, sponsors, donors, but you don't intend to form, you're a club perhaps, or you are gathering volunteers from a community to perform some sort of a thing, you could have a fiscal sponsor who would accept donations on your behalf, and the money would flow through. The donor could, based on consulting their tax preparation professional, possibly deduct some or all of their donation amount, and you would receive these amounts regardless of the fact that you are not a nonprofit. Now, if the fiscal sponsor wants to take a fee, a handling fee or something similar, that is allowed if there's a formal agreement in place, if there are considerations regarding what the activities are to continue the sponsorship, those are all on the table. So it makes the fiscal sponsorship relationship not merely a checkbox. It is something to maintain and to manage their expectations of all parties and so on. Not a trivial matter, but also enables smaller projects and groups of people to receive donors, to receive sponsorship and donor funds through this tax deduction channel possibility. Again, not a preparation professional. So the fiscal sponsorship path is useful. In our case, like I said, we had filed our 1023-EZ. Our financial needs are very small. $50,000 annual cap for the first 3 years of our existence. Our determination came in October of 2022. It was retroactive to our nonprofit incorporation on June 22nd, I believe it was, 2022. Piece of cake. So the Alliance of Civic Technologists was formed. Some people were using an Open Collective Foundation fiscal sponsor. Others had other arrangements. I'm not sure if there was ever a plan for the Alliance of Civic Technologists to become a fiscal sponsor by way of forming their own collective, which is a possibility. In fact, if you were to visit the Open Collective Foundation website, you can find some of their documents on forming your own collective. So it's not a secret. It's really more of an administration and legal consideration question, but it's not, on the face of it, not difficult to do. It's been done. It will be done again. But in this case, a bit of a spanner in the works. So before all of this, before the sunset process, which I've referred to sometimes as a rug pull, that's my own opinion, we officially recognized that it was a sunsetting based on change of direction. So, but from the perspective of the brigades and the individual civic volunteers, the sense that it was a rug pull, that the rug was being pulled out from under their efforts, is palpable. It's something you can hear expressed in anecdotally. Before all this was happening, I was having some discussions because a little bit of history. We were actually we started as the Code for Vegas Foundation, but we were rebooting the Code for Vegas brigade. And it was not even a brigade. Code for Vegas formed about 10 years ago or so with Code for America, part of Code for America, and it was a separate entity, but it was part of Code for America. The formal brigade infrastructure, I think, was not in place yet, so it was early days. But Code for Vegas was part of Code for America. So when we attempted to reform before I get into this, let me also mention democracy. So our Autonomous Cohort Transformation Project, which I'm describing, Project ACT, we have a GitHub organization at the moment and a couple of things to kick this off. Renewed focus on this given events of late. Democracy Lab, which I'll describe later, just democracylab.org, and the description of a project, XML schema, and methodology as a Wikipedia page on DOAP, DOAP. So we were rebooting the Code for Vegas group. Code for America was not totally receptive initially. They were going through a revisioning of the brigade infrastructure and practices and so on. So we registered codeforvegas.org. We had a hackathon. We were getting the ball rolling to get the band back together locally. Then we ran into some disagreements about intent. It's possible that there were accusations that one or more of our Code for Vegas people were overly enthusiastic, whatever that means. Certainly don't want enthusiasm in a volunteer organization. Do it for the money. So we sort of parted ways. We continued to develop Code for Vegas Foundation. We incorporated as a nonprofit in Nevada. Luckily, between the incorporation and the filing for, well, not luckily, because we did get our determination status for Code for Vegas Foundation. But in there, between July and June 2023 and October, it became clear that the Code for America people were not happy with us continuing as Code for Vegas Foundation. They claimed the name Code for Vegas. In fact, I heard on the grapevine, there was some concern on the part of other brigades that we were able to do this as an independent entity and not part of Code for America. So my theory is that we were ruffling feathers and there was a need to take action. In the meantime, we were hearing from people that if I'm not a coder, am I able to participate? So the notion of code for anything 10 years ago was okay, was fine. I think people understood coding is the new cool thing and all that. But we live in a different time, and innovation can take many forms. And so given that there's an innovation district, Innovate.Vegas is the city website aimed particularly at the International Innovation Center downtown, but also a source of some information about innovation general in the city of Las Vegas proper. And then innovation in general, there's a desire to have an innovation district in Clark County. Don't forget, studio near a street. So an innovation district in Clark County consisting of restaurants, bars, and coffee shops and meeting spaces. Okay, so we need local innovators as well. So Innovate for Vegas was going to kind of fit into this big puzzle, the mosaic of innovation, local innovators, non-local innovators, projects, ideas, and so on. So we initiated our name change. Eventually we got our determination in 2022. 2022. So we were a determined charity through 2023. And yeah, so the ruffled feathers were in 2023. By the end of 2023, we had changed our articles. So we were a Nevada nonprofit named Innovate for Vegas Foundation. December 11th, I submitted a letter with our amended articles to the IRS concerning our name change. No other information about our legally formed and in good standing public charity were to change. So the letter, I believe it was received on the 20th of December, 2023. And at long last, on the 11th of March, 2024, to the day, the IRS exempt organization database reflected our name change. So now, where up until Monday, Friday the 8th, but up until the morning of the 11th, before that, you would search for Code for Vegas Foundation, and we would be found. Innovate for Vegas Foundation had no record after 11 or on 11 March and after. If you go to the IRS exempt organization search page, which I've linked in various places in our official website and on our GitHub organization and so on. So if you visit there, you will now find our, with the name change as part of that record, you can see our tax return, our first one that we filed, $150 of donations, but yeah, not a lot to worry about. But we are a tax exempt organization in good standing. We are an actual Nevada nonprofit with a Nevada business ID. So we seem to be good to go as of 11 March. We do have to, the administration begins. So as a 501c3 public charity, we are powered by an all-volunteer governing body. That's me and our board of directors and so on. And our participants, so people who contribute creative works to our projects, who volunteer their time in any way. So no one is compensated directly as part of our organization. It's all volunteer. Motivation comes from within. This does not mean we don't have a path to some form of value for volunteer creative work contributions. The labs program and our desire to have a value for value model to deploy projects powered by or built by civic volunteers as part of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, to actually be able to monetize those either through an arm's length entity or as a collaboration with third parties. So all of these things emerge from open source projects, Creative Commons licensed content, and the self-motivated and peer-motivated civic volunteer efforts of our local innovators, or non-local innovators as the case may be. So we will continue to depend entirely on donations and other such support. If we have hackathons with snacks or free food in general, if we ever want to get t-shirts or other merch, if we want to have t-shirts that other people could wear to support our organization, supplies, fees for our domains, and so on. So all of these monies would come from external donors, and ideally, they would be tax deductible. Consult your tax preparation professional. I'm not going to keep saying that, but you can assume that I have. It's been difficult to engage with potential sponsors up until now. We don't have much to show for our efforts thus far. Finding local innovators who want to volunteer their time. This is something not necessarily familiar to the potential local innovators of the greater Vegas area. So for this reason and others, we have really been reaching out to other civic volunteer organizations, especially in light of the changes at Code for America regarding the brigades. And of course, very recently, in the past week, the changes to the Open Collective Foundation and the ability for some of these former brigades to continue operating in a mode similar to the mode they were operating before. That is, having a fiscal sponsor of some sort, not being a fully formed legal entity, having access to services at reduced or zero cost. And again, I'll describe some of those that we have. So it's been difficult to engage our donors and sponsors here. We really have received no financial support other than the $150, as I mentioned, from two individuals. So this will be changing ideally as we can now turn our focus entirely to our first and second projects, which I've talked about other times. Essentially the My Muni project, and then Smart Social, which is part of that, sort of 60% part of My Muni and 40% standalone. So these two projects, the Open Transit project will figure into the My Muni, and the Open Data Capture platform will as well. So the welcome. So really the My Muni project is sort of the hub. And this does align with our Virtual Vegas capstone project, which was essentially going to be how all of our projects would fit together to take advantage of the notion of a digital twin of Virtual Vegas. No, not a 3D visualization flyover. You can do that today on Google Earth or with Aero AI's projects that they're working on and others. This would be more about data collection, data capture, data analysis, interaction, engagement with people of the greater Vegas area and with visitors as well. So if we can start rolling those things out, ideally we will have an entryway for potential donors and sponsors to participate financially or otherwise with our endeavors. Not to mention gathering up more local and non-local innovators to volunteer as contributors of creative works. And remember, not everything is code. It could be icons, other imagery, could be content, words, could be language translations, could be testing, could be marketing, could be documentation. The list goes on. Locally, our costs thus far have been essentially zero. There is obviously, we have a couple of domains that we've registered. Those are not free. Would that they were. We had to file our annual list, $50. We had to file our amended articles, another $50. The power of nickels and dimes. So luckily our fees have our financial requirements for fees and paying for things like domain name registrations have been reasonable, although clearly having the support of donors and sponsors helps us get the word out. So it's a two-way street in that regard. Having money to pay some bills would be nice, but having more participation from donors and sponsors, ultimately more valuable. Sounds crazy, I know, but it is. So autonomy, I think, is valuable. Code for Vegas formed as part of Code for America, as I described. It was about 10 years ago. The open data program was the main focus. It was basically the reason that Code for Vegas was formed. It was driven by our director emeritus. We've taken enough of his time. Sean Looker was co-founder, co-captain with Ryan Quinn, same titles, of the original Code for Vegas. There was a deployment with Code for America and the city of Las Vegas of the initial open data platform that continues to exist today. It's available on ArcGIS. It's a topic I've covered before and I will cover again, so we'll leave that there. There were no brigades at that moment, although the brigade program would follow soon after to formalize the collaboration with local volunteers. So when we reformed our Code for Vegas Foundation, we, because of the kerfuffle, we formed an independent nonprofit. We eventually got our IRS determination as a 501c3, and that continues to this day under our new name with all of our T's crossed and I's dotted on the government side. The non-government side, for example, TechSoup, through which we received our gratis Google Workspace for 501c3s, not for nonprofits. You will see advertised that Google will offer free services for nonprofits. What they really mean is 501c3s. Nonprofit is a state designation. 501c3 tax-exempt organization is a IRS designation. They are talking about the IRS designation, not the state designation. So we have updated our TechSoup account to reflect our name change and continued status. That's the fun part. We changed one word, and it has literally taken months and emails and sending paper mail and registered messages and checking websites and updating different. It's not a trivial matter, as it turns out. One of our banks we've already updated. That actually was easy. So our accounts receivable, which is free. We don't have much transaction going on other than paying bills. I'm sorry, accounts payable. Our accounts payable service, which is Mercury, which is pretty cool. They've been nothing but helpful and quite useful. So we have virtual payment cards that we can very easily pay for our services. We can break them into different things. So, paying for hosting, paying for domains, paying for other recurring services and items can all be attributed to different payment cards, which are essentially payment accounts. It makes the accounting very easy, very quick. And the Mercury company in the fintech space has been a joy. Our accounts receivable, which integrates with Stripe, I think we're almost ready. I think they just have to officially change the legal name in their records. But we've changed all of our other public-facing and business name details to align with our new name. And then Novo, which is another fintech company we use for accounts receivable, they do invoicing. They have an automatic integration with Stripe, which is not a huge deal, but convenient. Novo has always been a sort of a headache when it comes to customer service, so when you're an all-volunteer organization, you really start to realize where time can be wasted very easily, and it is irrecoverable. Something to think about in everything. How are you spending your time? So there are some other services. We use Canva, for example, to generate some images, such as our podcast artwork, cover art. We have a Teams account, gratis, with GitHub. So we officially, you have to file not really file. You provide your determination letter from the IRS and so on. So I've provided the new affirmation letter. Our database entry is current, of course. So that's a minor thing. We do have a sponsor button as part of GitHub, so that will require an additional step to align the new name. There are a couple of other things that we'll have to square away, so it's administrata. But the nice thing is that when you're a 501c3, you have access to gratis goods and services, mostly services, mostly because when companies provide you with these things, they can write them off their own taxes. So that's a benefit for them. So as a 501c3, we could approach companies about T-shirts, other swag, snacks, free food, hackathon, details, food, drink, snacks, T-shirts, stickers, etc. So we could have done that before. Now that we are completely and totally renamed, it will be slightly easier, no explanation necessary, in the interest of transparency. So our autonomy has been a mild inconvenience, paperwork and fees, time spent, interactions, explaining things a couple times, scanning in paper documents and so on. But essentially, as an independent nonprofit, we didn't have to, and we continue to not have to, depend on Code for America, on Open Collective Foundation, on any fiscal sponsors, on any entities who might need to make a change or who would generally like to not continue with whatever relationship. We don't have any of those concerns. So as a completely autonomous standalone entity, while it has been mildly painful, not nearly so painful as what I will personally describe as a bit of a 1-2 punch, with the end of the brigade program infrastructure being available to the existing brigades and the individual civic volunteers who made up those brigades. And now this Open Collective Foundation dissolution, which doesn't affect all of the set of former brigades, but certainly, again, more than none. So that's additional slaps in the face. It's very difficult to maintain the esprit de corps of a civic volunteer organization and its participants when these administrative headaches get in the way of actual progress. As I so often say, it is very difficult for the psyche if you find yourself spending more of your time trying to accomplish things than actually accomplishing them. So brigades, fiscal sponsors, chaos, lack of clarity, uncertainty, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. These are things that require additional effort and time and explanation, and these get in the way of actually putting time and energy, interest, and effort to good use. It's unfortunate, but business is business. So while the possibility of collaboration with other brigades may have remained on the table, the fact that Code for America has sunset the brigade program as of the end of 2023 means all infrastructure, all civic volunteers who may have depended on Code for America fiscal sponsorship and infrastructure support are no longer, or never were, on their own. They are on their own now. They were not on their own before. So now they're kind of on their own. Like, good luck. You don't get the free, we get free Google Workspace through TechSoup. So as a 501c3 charity, like I said, so free email for all, any users that need it. Our board of directors and our different components of our nonprofit corporation have email accounts and use of Google Meet and calendars and all that stuff, all for free, which is nice. So if you were depending on Code for America as your fiscal sponsor to obtain these services that they had arranged, when those go away, you're on your own. So that can be a frustrating experience. And not to mention the fact that Code for America was, I don't know where this ended up, but was requiring people to not, or entities, brigades, former brigades, to avoid using They're long-standing names. If you were a brigade for years and you had a certain amount of brand awareness, brand credibility, that would be going away. So that's the way that is. Just extra frustration. So now they're on their own. We don't have to concern ourselves with these things, though. We learned early on that being dependent on Code for America, for example, to throttle our attempt to reboot. So we had to wait for their opinions and feedback and thoughts and eventual disparagement and worse. So we didn't have to do that. And as I mentioned, we were hearing from some through the grapevine that some other individuals were wondering how they too could become independent brigades or similar. So we were not calling ourselves a brigade. We were Code for Vegas Foundation, former Code for Vegas brigade, or not even really a brigade. If we even mentioned the word brigade, it was a former in a historical perspective. So we initially started having some conversations about enabling or helping in some way other organizations, other cohorts to become autonomous as we had. We started calling it the Autonomous Cohort Transformation Project. So Project ACT. This unfortunately aligns with the Alliance of Civic Technologists acronym, also ACT. So to be clear, ours is Project-ACT. And I have linked to our very Spartan GitHub organization. That's all we have at the moment. We actually formed, I created the GitHub organization quite some time ago. We also have a Discord server, which is still a work in progress. There's really nothing on it yet. But we started these and then we kind of were like, oh, well, they're going to pull the rug anyway, and people are going to be forming this ACT thing, which has a name collision already with the acronym. So we kind of backburnered it, but no progress from civic technologists. People left wondering what they're going to do. There is a need for some sort of alternative to the sort of central planning notion of needing to get everyone on the same page, form a single entity of some sort, figure out where to get fiscal sponsoring, and so on and so on. So forming an entity in your locality, your nonprofit creation in your state, they're usually, I think in all cases, a state designation as a nonprofit. You form a nonprofit corporation or equivalent. You file with the IRS to become a completely standalone 501c3, or perhaps you make arrangements to create a fiscal sponsorship, collective or similar. These are topics of discussion for our Project ACT. What have you done? What works for you? What could we do on our side that could have worked for your side better or worse? So how can we take our collaboration that we could do on projects and start with making our individual former brigades and other cohorts the first project to enable to get around the bits of chaos that keep raining down on how to conduct business. Conducting the business of civic volunteerism should not be so difficult, yet it is. So autonomous cohorts would not be subject to administrative changes. So you are a standalone organization. Whatever Code for America does has not even a lick of impact on what Innovate for Vegas Foundation does or does not do. Top-down agenda concerns we don't have to worry about that. Policies and politics are always fun for someone else. While we have reached out to people at other brigades and other places for participation in things like our virtual or hybrid, virtual and in-person NASA Space Apps Challenge event from 2023, other than these sorts of outreaches on sort of a level playing field, peer-to-peer collaboration arrangement or scheme, we really have no interaction with other cohorts, and that makes movement, it makes planning, it makes governance, it makes policy planning of projects and so on that much easier. You can develop a project and ask others if they would like to collaborate. You can develop a project and see that others are working on similar projects, possibly share some of the creative work contributions. Thanks to the joy of open source licensing, that can be negotiated to work in everybody's favor. Less reinventing of a wheel if we can make use of the wheel that you're using under favorable licensing terms that are compatible with our project, and so on. In a bottom-up autonomous environment, collaboration across cohorts can be managed by the cohorts themselves. So we can reach out to others and offer up our projects. We can look for other projects that might benefit from our efforts, etc., etc. Projects can emerge from the common concerns of various localities and can develop that way, but can at the same time be tailored to an individual locality. So there's no reason to be stuck with the way another place is doing something and then have to start over if what they are doing doesn't work with what we need. So if we start off in the early days of saying, okay, well, what are the commonalities? And we can try to work towards avoiding duplication of effort where possible, collaboration across borders without a central governing concern. If we can take these local implementations and share them across those borders, suddenly collaborative efforts on one side of the country can benefit the other and vice versa. I know here in Vegas, with our 40 million visitors, allegedly, according to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, if we are able to pursue and release eventually not only our own projects, the MyMuni project, for example, but if MyMuni can be, as we're planning, a platform to which we might add projects from other localities, for example, Trash AI from Open Fresno and what will be Open Sacramento, OpenSac. That project is not Fresno nor Sacramento centric. It has to do with visual classification of refuse for possible recycling, I think. So Trash AI is a project that may fit into the MyMuni platform. If we can develop MyMuni into something that could be usable in various places as a starting point for deploying services, applications, and information resources and so on in a particular locality, we don't have to reinvent that wheel. What we're working on may fit into what somebody else is working on that might be similar. So let's learn and interoperate. There's no reason to build in a silo. Civic volunteerism is not about IPOs and dominating markets. It's about community elevation, making the best uses of civic volunteer time and expertise. And let us not forget, giving credit to all of those involved. On a side note, this is something that I had a problem with Code for America. It did not appear, so this is my allegation, they did not appear to always, universally, provide transparent attribution to those who did not opt out of that for volunteer contributors to projects. That was not cool. So our autonomous cohort transformation project-act, so our GitHub repo, started life as the autonomous cohort transformation, right? So how can we help using what we've learned and then forming a sort of a collaboration starting point? How can we learn about what works, about being an independent entity? What kind of communication do we need for collaboration? Should we have a common Slack? Should we have a common Discord where we all collaborate? Can we collaborate with standard tools like, not tools, but protocols, basically file protocols like DOPE, which is description of a project, which is a standard XML file that describes a project. Where's the repository? Who's the maintainer? FOF, friend of a friend. How can we connect individual contributors and cohorts, former brigades and similar, so that they are easily findable? We can do this in standard ways using the likes of DOPE and FOF. You can do things like publishing full contributor lists using GitHub, standard files like contributors. You can do, there are some other projects, I think it's called all contributors, where you include people who are not necessarily committers to a project, which I'm in favor of. You can use the FOF infrastructure to include all contributors, and description of a project can refer to the actual contributors in a standard way. So that would exist outside of GitHub. You could build spiders, or we could build spiders, spidering tools that will go and seek out FOF links to other cohorts and DOPE files that describe projects. And now when you look at open issues per project, you should be able to construct a help wanted profile of sorts for a particular project, for a particular cohort in need of assistance. Now, do I need to join your project to participate, or can I simply point you to some existing code that we have in our project that might help your project? So if we can become issue and need granular on collaboration, we may be able to accelerate the sharing of effort without the overhead, the perceptions of needing to join projects or to be overly concerned with governance or structure, etc. So it's something to think about, how we might collaborate across these different administrative boundaries. Virtually, we are all working together. So if you look at something like Democracy Lab, they enable a particular organization to post a project, and then that they have open positions or roles or needs for, participation. Totally fine. So that's like a centralized resource. However, if you publish your project descriptions and participants and issues are available in a GitHub or GitLab or similar. So if your issues and your needs, say you have a user story with an open implementation issue, right? Like we need a user who wants to do this and needs to do that. We need the code, or we need a resource like some documentation or an icon. So it doesn't have to be just code. But if you can discover these things, you don't need to have a centralized resource like Democracy Lab. Not that it's not valuable, but you can also develop bottom-up tools that are peer-to-peer, that are fabric-based, that make use of these standards, which have been around forever. Dope and Fof predate you, probably. They're back in the day. So here we have our Project Act, not only the autonomous cohort transformation, to have discussions about what do I do now that I'm not a brigade and also not fiscally sponsored, right? So keeping the band together is going to be a challenge, and then moving forward, additional challenge. So cohort transformation to become autonomous, to be freestanding public charity, whether you should form a collective. These are all discussion topics that we are trying to be a part of proactively. At the same time, the autonomous cohort tessellation would come from gathering dope and fof, right? Description of a project, a friend of a friend, like which cohorts are connected. They know about each other. They're friends, quote unquote friends. How do we find individuals and cohorts? What are they working on? What are their projects? Can we create a tapestry, perhaps covering the globe, certainly covering parts of the United States so far? A tessellation, a mosaic of cohorts and individuals and projects. How can we visualize those? How can we discover them? How can we connect them for collaboration potential, to make people more aware of them, and so on? And again, I'll point out we have 40 million visitors, give or take, coming to the greater Vegas area. We have population in Clark County, which is southern Nevada, about 2.3 million visitors, somewhere near 40 million. I don't think it's actually 40 million. I think it's a little bit short of that, but call it 40 million. What a great way to expose open source civic volunteer projects than to create things that make a smart city smarter, that visitors to a place can make use of. And then when they go home, say, why don't we have that here? They may have that there. How would they even know where to look? Well, check out the autonomous cohort tessellation. We should at least know about each other, and that's the first goal, making the world understand what the value of civic volunteerism. This is a larger issue with open source projects, open source developers, oftentimes working for free, not receiving the attention they deserve, sometimes having their work borrowed beyond the license terms. A host of issues about fairness when it comes to people doing good or trying to do good. Then there's always the consideration that some open source efforts are really about getting free labor, free work. That's a different thing. If we as a 501c3 can enable our local and non-local innovators to build cool things to add to their personal resume or curriculum vitae or portfolio, if those people can learn from each other and help others learn from them, if we can make our communities better, if we can deliver on a value for value business proposition and actually get some sort of return on the investment of time and expertise on the part of the civic volunteers, if that means financial rewards, donor, sponsor, tip jar type things, if we can get people get jobs, if we can get continuing engineering or continuing project development efforts from our initial open source deployments, if our labs plan for value can work, if the My Muni project can launch as a real deployment, maybe ad-driven on a for-profit platform, So ad-driven, subscriber-driven, tip jars with full attribution of, this feature was developed by this team as part of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. Oh, by the way, this feature was developed by Open Fresno and these collaborators. A combination, right? So almost like the opposite direction. If any World War II fans out there, you may have seen on the sides of airplanes, those little stencils. So you could literally have on a particular project a little stencil for Innovate for Vegas Foundation, a little stencil for Open Fresno, a little stencil for Open Cleveland, whatever these different cohorts are. A little icon, a link to their project, their participation, completely transparent about who is contributing, a way for people to recognize and celebrate those contributions, show their appreciation. The list goes on. We can make these things work, and it doesn't really take a lot of effort. It does take some sort of cooperation, which kind of starts out with being discovered and knowing who's doing what and how they could be a part of what you're doing and vice versa. So that's a part of what we need to do next. Now that we've accomplished our surprisingly minimal but yet still annoying and paperwork and administrata limited effort to just change our name. But we've done that part, and there's more to do. And then the challenges stuff, I have not even mentioned this, but there's a challenge that has been thrown down on the part of the Sphere here in Vegas, which I'll talk about at another time. But now that we are completely renamed and we can kind of throw our shingle out with the new name and a new donor button, we can reach out to the Sphere. They have a challenge for high school and college students regarding some content that might appear on the exosphere, the outside of the sphere, in quite literally up in lights. That project, the challenge, will be ending in June of 2024. So clearly our challengers.vegas platform, which is on our to-do list, could feature the exosphere and this particular challenge. I think it's the Exo Student Challenge or something. Again, I'll talk about this probably next week. If we can feature people performing local innovation in the school age part of our ecosystem, that bodes well for the future. I've mentioned this before. It will take 10 years to develop a culture of innovation if we start today. That is based on 7th graders, age 12, getting out of the college age, 22, having been indoctrinated with the notion that if they would like to try ideas and be innovative, they can and should. And that's how you develop a culture of innovation, by innovating, making that a part of your culture. So there you go. We'll see what unfolds. But anyway, we'll congratulate ourselves, pats on the back all around. We're officially, legally, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. Soon, you too will be able to donate to what will be our new website. That is high on the list. We need to deploy a prettier website for our nonprofit corporation and then start deploying the 4.Vegas platform for our soon-to-be our aspirational civic volunteers who don't even know yet that they want to, but they will. So on that note, I thank you for listening. As always, do check out our website, innovateforvegas.org. It has today's episode posted. You can play it in the embedded Spotify player. However, as we deploy this new website, we will definitely be featuring our own media, such as this audio program. We have a YouTube channel that will eventually see the light of day as Google Podcasts gets out of the podcast publishing business and moves it over to YouTube. I mean literally Google Podcasts. I don't mean Google the company. They're still affiliated with YouTube. We would like to be our first primary source of our own programming and make Spotify and YouTube and others the secondary. We would like to eventually move into some live streaming if we ever do a hackathon or if we participate in challenges or if we facilitate them. Clearly being able to talk about them, to feature local innovators working on projects, on their outcomes, all this and more should all kind of form its own little tessellation of innovation, participation, celebration. Yeah, you can hear my voice is giving out already. I'll blame the weather, but I've done 2 audio programs today. This is the second one. The first one, our Cafe Genius Impresarios program, which is about continuous introspection, which figures into the My Muni project. So 2 great tastes go great together. Interesting things on the horizon. Be a part of it. Thank you.